Greetings from Tajik State Pedagogical University named after Sadruddin Aini. We will continue our lesson about the history of Tajik people, and for today our topic will be about the Bronze Age and the beginning of the civilization of Tajik people. For today's presentation, we prepared a special plan by which we will run our session today. And first plan for our today's lesson will be about the Bronze Age, definition, history, and periods. Of course, here we will stay more about definition, more about the history and periods of the Bronze Age. And later, in the middle of our presentation, we will tell you about the SARAZM, where the land begins, SARAZM settlement of Tajikistan, which is the part of the Bronze Age of Tajikistan, which is the beginning of the Bronze Age of Tajikistan. And also the chapter we will have about the historical-cultural regions of Tajikistan. Of course, here we will tell you about the different regions of Tajikistan where they discovered settlements of the period of the Bronze Age, like southern part of Tajikistan, like a north, like a east, and we will tell you more about the regions. Especially we will stay about the Bronze Age of the regions of Tajikistan. And at the last we will tell you about the special discoveries of the Bronze Age of Tajikistan, and here we will tell you about 5 to 10 rarest discoveries from the territory of Tajikistan, and we hope it will be very interesting for you, dear students. And for the presentation of today, we prepared the list of the literature for you, which we gathered 12 books, 12 very interesting books of the historians of Tajikistan, and also some historians from abroad. And 12 books which we gathered here, they are available in libraries. Even some of them you can find on internet, and there will be no problem to find this literature from the internet. The Bronze Age, it's one of the periods in which the prehistory of the human being has been divided, and it is the part of the so-called Metal Age. Its main characteristic was the use of the material that gives it its name, like a bronze, which allowed to the inhabitants of the time to make better their tools. The beginning of the period, it's sometimes called the Chalcolithic, Copper Stone Age, referring the initial use of pure copper along with its predecessor tool making, material stone. An ancient civilization is deemed to be part of the Bronze Age because it either produced bronze by smelting its own copper and alloying it with tin, arsenic, or other metals, or traded all the items for bronze from production areas elsewhere. Bronze is harder and more durable than the other metals available at the time, allowing Bronze Age civilizations to gain a technological advantage. Classical historiography was divided the study of this period into 3 different sections or stages: the Ancient Bronze Age, the Middle, and the last of the Bronze Age, the end of the Bronze Age. However, since the use of the bronze was not uniform throughout the planet, the chronology of this period varies depending on the geographical area. During this pre-Bronze Age, people used stone or at least non-metal implements, like the archaeological artifacts one sees made of flint or obsidian. The Bronze Age was the beginning of the era when people also made their tools and weapons of metal. Copper was known in Anatolia by 6500 BC It wasn't until the second millennium BC that bronze, an alloy of copper and commonly tin, came into general use. In about 1000 of BC, the Bronze Age ended and the Iron Age began. Before the end of the Bronze Age, iron was rare. It was only used for decorative items and possibly for the coins, possibly use of the coins. Determining when the Bronze Age ended and the Iron Age began, therefore, takes into the account the relative preponderance of these metals. Bronze Age, definition of the Bronze Age as a noun, a period of human culture marked by the use of bronze as for weapons and tools that began between 4000 and 3000 BC. The definition of the Bronze Age for the first time known for the use in 1852, and meaning was defined. If we go out through the history of the Bronze Age, it says that the Bronze Age is the time of the period when people made their tools from an alloy, a mixture of metals, called bronze. Bronze is a mixture of mainly copper and tin, usually 9 parts of copper to 1 part of tin. For example, bronze was first used in Mesopotamia around 3300 BC before Christ. Additionally, why was the Bronze Age so important? Bronze Age was from about 3300 BC to about 800 BC. Tin bronze was better than arsenic bronze because the alloying process was more easily controlled and the resulting alloy was stronger and easier to cast. Bronze became important because it was a strong metal for use. Likewise, how did the Bronze Age start? The Aegean Bronze Age began around 3200 before Christ when civilizations first established a far-ranging trade network. This network imported tin and charcoal to Cyprus, where copper was mined and alloyed with the tin to produce bronze. Illyrians are also believed to have roots in their early Bronze Age. And why did the Bronze Age end? There are different sayings that the Bronze Age causes. The collapse of the Bronze Age was earthquake, climate change, and most of the scholars says that it was the big earthquake, climate change, that harvest got finished. I mean, the civilizations break down. And dear students, now we will stay about the periods of the Bronze Age. And the first section is the ancient Bronze Age. I mean, first stage of the Bronze Age. Very important differences according to the area of the world. It is considered that the first stage comprised from 1500 to 1200 BC. The civilizations of this period were dedicated to hunting and fishing, although with their growing presence of agriculture and livestock. Likewise, human beings of the time began to trade in products made by the artisans, including metal. Among the later, the Bronze Age stood out. Finally, the peoples of this period used to bury their dead in mass graves, many of them under the houses of themselves. Second section is a Middle Bronze Age, middle of the Bronze Age. The second period of the Bronze Age developed between 1200 and 1000 of BC with the aforementioned regional differences. Civilizations gave a considerable boost to their commercial activity and extended the distance traveled. These trips also served to search for metal, especially the coveted tin. Armies became more powerful thanks to the development of the metal weapons. Some of these made of bronze, like swords, knives, and daggers. The cities finally gained in complexity, and buildings began to be built inside the settlements. And about the late Bronze Age, we'll tell you that the last stage of the Bronze Age lasted until 900 BC, when it gave the way to the Iron Age. It was in this period that the first great civilizations appeared with much more complex, social complexes. Economic and military structures developed. These towns became authentic empires that with the time dominated great extensions of land. In the economic sphere, these civilizations took advantage of the potential granted by the elaboration of new weapons, the extension in the use of the stone mill, and the construction of granaries. In addition, merchants began to sell items such as salt and glass. One of the most characteristic aspects of this period was the construction of defensive walls in the settlements. The improvement in the equipment of the armies caused that the cities looked for better ways to defend themselves. Already at the end of the Bronze Age, there were massive migrations in some areas, according to the historians. Some empires disappeared away and were replaced by others. Likewise, new cultures developed, such as the Celtic culture, whose importance grew during the Iron Age. Dear students, now we will stay in a second section of our today's presentation about SARAZM settlement. And the topic of the second section got the name of SARAZM, where the land begins. It's really interesting to introduce you with the history of SARAZM, with the finding of SARAZM, with the discoveries, with the importance of the settlement of SARAZM. In 12th of September 2020, in the celebration of the anniversary, 5,500 of the anniversary of SARAZM, all the historians, scientists, all the guests gathered in SARAZM settlement in ancient city of Benjikent, and by the honorable leader of the nation, President of the Republic of Tajikistan, His Excellency Emomali Rahmon, was made a speech there, and His Excellency Emomali Rahmon mentioned that many pages of the history of SARAZM have yet to be unveiled, and we hope that national and foreign scholars will continue exploring huge pages of the history of this center of the civilization and make it accessible to the world community. History of the SARAZMs begins by its name, SARAZM, Sari Zamin, the beginning of land, the beginning of earth. The Bronze Age is an important epoch in the history of mankind. The proper Bronze Age extends from the end of the 3rd millennium BC up to the 9th and 12th centuries BC. Over the centuries, the implements of production further became perfect and the technology grew. SARAZM is an Neolithic, Chalcolithic, early Bronze Age agricultural urban outpost, occupied from the 4th until the end of the 3rd millennium BC. All the dates mentioned are uncalibrated. In early period of SARAZM settlement consisted of separate one-room dwelling houses. But in the period of developed SARAZM settlements are surrounded by defense walls. Public buildings with a two-faced fireplace are also found in these settlements. A new trend towards construction of multi-room buildings appeared. In the later Bronze Age, the size of the SARAZM settlements increased. on account of the multi-room houses built in several blocks. The handicraft production had also reached a new stage. There existed workshops for casting copper wares, ranging from needles to seals and daggers. From stone, besides implements, various ornaments, the beautiful pottery was also made in the SARAZM settlement. The potters acquired a high proficiency in making crockery of different types and sizes, from small jugs to large vessels. The textile handicraft was also quite developed. SARAZM settlement, town, city, is located on the left bank of Zarafshan River, 15 km west of the Penjiken city, Sogd province, Sogd region. The settlement occupied the area of 130 hectares. The historical monument of SARAZM was discovered in the fall of the 1976 by archaeologist scientist Abdullah John Isokov, based on the find of the resident of the village of SARAZM Avazali, Jamuat Chimkorgon, now the SARAZM of the Penjiken regional, Ashurali Taylonov. Ashurali Taylonov found an axe in 1972 during the construction of a residential building, which he kept at home for more than 4 years. In 1976, Taylonov showed the found axe to the archaeologist Isakov, who at the time was conducting excavations in the city of Penjiken, and from the time the study and research of ancient SARAZM started, ancient SARAZM began. Starting with the end of the 4th century BC, the settlement of SARAZM was one of the biggest centers of ancient metallurgy. Among domestic buildings and warehouses were found shrines with particular interiors and altars for burnt offerings, murals, decorated walls, and other cultic details. On July 31, 2020, the 34th session of the UNESCO held in Brazil, the proto-urban site of SARAZM was included in the World Heritage List of UNESCO. In general, we can mention that SARAZM settlement is the beginning of the civilization of Central Asia. According to the historians, most of the artifacts which were discovered from the settlement of SARAZM, they are really rarest in the territory of Central Asia. And all the attentions, all the researching power of the scientists, of the archaeologists, of the historians are on the SARAZM today, because they really believe that they can really find out a new discoveries which again will tell us about other secrets of SARAZM town, of the ancient civilization of Tajik people. So dear students, now we will stay about the third section of our today's session. It's a historical-cultural regions of Tajikistan. It should be pointed out that during the Bronze Age, the territory of Tajikistan was as a central part of the Central Asian civilization. According to the historians from the territory of Tajikistan, they discovered lots of different settlements, cities, towns. For example, just from the north of Tajikistan, northern part of Tajikistan, they discovered the SARAZM settlement, burial site of Zarche Khalifa, Dasht Qozi. And if we go through the territory of the southern part of Tajikistan, we can find out there the settlements of Kangartut, which is in the territory of Temur Malik, Ghelot, which is also nearby the Kulab city. And it should be pointed out that even Kairakum culture, one of the most interesting culture of the period of the Bronze Age, and Tulkhor settlement, Makoni settlement. These are the settlements from where the historians already in the time of the early Soviet, the researchers discovered such really nice artifacts, and still after the independence, the Tajik historians, Tajik archaeologists trying to find out all the secrets of these regions, all the secrets of these settlements. And we hope that in future even they'll find such nice historical artifacts, and we will find out another civilizations, another cultures of that period. So according to our next chapter of the presentation, we will tell you about the discoveries of the Bronze Age from Tajikistan. I mean, by the discoveries, we mean that we will tell you about the, let's choose 5 or 6 such nice artifacts, nice discoveries from the period of the Bronze Age, which tells us the fact that we can tell the history of Tajik people according using the books of the history, and also using the discoveries, artifacts. And if we go through the other parts of the Bronze Age in Tajikistan, we can mention about discoveries from Zarcha Khalifa, which is also there. They discovered some graves, some bronze tools, knives, needles, hooks, and for hair wasting, some artifacts was discovered from Zarcha Khalifa. And according to the historians from the south of Tajikistan, we also had discovered 2 graves, 2 graves of the ladies. One of them were from Ghelot and one of them were from Kangur. By the face, even if we look at the face of them, we see that they were belong to the Aryan civilization according to the form of the face. And also from the part of the Ghelot and Kangartut, they had discovered such a nice statues, terracottas, the belief of them. It should be pointed out that during the time of the Bronze Age, several crafts were already developed in the territory of Tajikistan, like blacksmithing, like pottery, art, ceramic tools from the territory of SARAZM, Dasht Qozi, Zarcha Khalifa, Makoni Mor, Karakom culture were really amazing, because they used also different dust, different lens, different grains for their different ceramic material, different shape, different design. Even if we look at some discoveries from Makoni Mor, Tulkhor or Karakom culture, we see that painting, design, shape, really they are, most of them are similar, but they have some difference between other discoveries from Central Asia. We see that they prepare their own culture in the items of them, and they are really amazing. And dear students, it should be pointed out that we need to protect them, we need to learn about them, we need to study them, we need to popularize them, we need to tell to the all of the world that we have such a nice, such ancient history. And all these settlements of the Bronze Age, they proven facts that they are the ancestors of Tajik people. Dear students, we tried to explain you about the history of the Bronze Age, some definitions, history, periods of the Bronze Age, and also we studied about the SARAZM settlement, we studied about the historical-cultural regions of Tajikistan, and we studied about the discoveries of the Bronze Age from Tajikistan. And we hope that you got some nice lesson, you got some really useful information about the Bronze Age. And for the next session, for the next class of our subject, the history of Tajik people, we will tell you about other states, about other culture of Tajik people. Thank you for your attention.